Wow, that's a lot of people. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us today on this awesome event. This is a huge honor for us to be able to show you a bit of how we do things here at Sandfall Interactive. My name's Alan Reynaud. Whoops. I'm the lead character artist at Sandfall for about 5 years now. And I've worked on all the main characters, almost all the enemies, some NPC, and I've done also a lot of outfit customization. And yeah, I was in charge of modeling, sculpting, texturing, and a bit of integrating assets in the engine. But also I've been doing some concept art with our awesome and lovely Nicolas Maxon-Francombe.
Hello everyone, it's a huge honor to be here too. I'm Mathieu Costat. I've been working at Sandfall since 4 years now as an environment artist. I had the opportunity to work on pretty much every level, and on my work I'm doing modeling, sculpting, texturing, and integration into the engine as Alan, but also some shader and debugging inside the engine.
So before we continue, here's a little bit of context about the studio. So the studio was founded in 2020 in Montpellier. It's a lovely city based in the south of France. The Sandfall Interactive is a French independent studio who focused on video game development for PC and console. The core team is made up of around 40 people, and yeah, we focused on crafting original franchise and with a big focus on narrative and art direction. And you can also see our lovely happiness manager, Monaco, on the slide.
You should never have come. You're only going to make things worse for everyone.
No. She chose to come. I didn't make the rules between you two.
You're fighting to change things.
For those who come after. Right?
I thought I was used to losing people.
Yeah, me too.
Is this true? Miles with him. We need to go, now. Who are you?
I know it seems absurd to offer oblivion as recompense, but
She'll never paint again.
Of our game, we just show it to you because it will. Thank you. And we wanted to show it to you to have a better view of all of the problematics linked to the game.
So yeah, I'm gonna talk a bit about what is the game. It is focused around the narrative experience, as every game we want to create at Sandfall. It is a reactive turn-based RPG with unique real-time mechanics that gets the battle more immersion. And we also have a strong focus on the artistic direction. The game is available on PC, PS5, Xbox Series, and Steam Deck, and it was published by Clair Interactive.
Yeah, so that brings us to the subject of the presentation. how did we manage to test the game with 4 artists and in a short amount of time? So first of all, we need to introduce the problematics we face during production, and so that you will have a better understanding of the solution that we choose to face those problems. And so one of them is the art direction. And the game is set in the Belle Epoque. So the Belle Epoque is around at the end of the 19th centuries. And it's set also in France. We have a lot of Art Deco elements, especially like on patterns, but also symbols and everything in the game. And we have also a realistic art style with a strong artistic choice. Like for example, the folds on the male clothing, those are made by hand, but we wanted an effect like that on the characters. And we also have big contrast, especially in the light and shadows, but that's because the game is highly inspired by Clair Obscur, which is a movement in painting, and we wanted to have that feeling. But big contrast is not only present in light and shadow, it's present everywhere in the game. Like for example, we have high contrasted shapes and materials, but also colors. Everything is high contrasted in the game.
Regarding the environments, we follow the same guidelines for the art direction, but we also have some other key aspects that we want to follow. The first one is that we want to have grounded architecture with some surreal and imaginative aspects around it. So in this example of Lumière, you have the Haussmann buildings that are really related to the one in Paris, with the dimension, the texture, and the proportion. But you also have all the paint shapes that gives a more abstract element with all the floating assets above the city. Another thing that is really important for us is to have a strong focus on mood and atmosphere, and that goes through lighting and fogs. And we also want all our environments to feel like living painting, and as you can see on those screenshots, you can see that we wanted to recreate the screenshot inside the engine for the environment. So it's something we always have in mind when we create environments. We want to represent the best we can the mood of the concept art. So I want to introduce you a bit the environment team I'm a part of. So at the peak of the production, we were 3 environment artists at Sandfall, counting Carla Deves, the lead environment artist. So we made all the assets of the game together. We also have one and only level designer, who is Thibault Leblanc. He worked on every level and on the workflow too. We also have Alexandre Breton, who is the technical artist of the project, and he does a lot of Houdini stuff and tools inside the engine, and also a lot of optimization. But last but not least, we also have Nicolas Maxon-Francon, the art director that made all the concepts for the environments, but also a lot of set dressing, so it was really helpful. So as you can see, we are not a huge team, so we have to manage how to do a huge scope like that with fewer people. And to show you how the scope was, we made around 1,000 textured assets. So there is 1,000 texture assets in the game, approximately. We also have 19 main levels in the game. So these are the levels that you cross when you do only the main pass with the main story. We also have 13 side optional levels and 34 small optional levels. So it was a lot of levels to manage and to maintain at the same quality.
And in the character team, yeah, we faced the same challenges. But before I go in detail, I wanted to show you our incredible team. So we have Amandine Marest. She's the hair and text character artist. She does all of the hair of the character, but also a bit of groom. We have Armand Lecointe. She's our technical character artist. She rigged a lot of characters, but she was also in charge of making sure the game ran properly, especially on the character side, so she did a great job at that. And we worked before with Ophélie Gomez. She was a character artist that helped a lot for NPC. She did a lot of jobs, especially in Lumière and in the gestual. So yeah, and we welcome recently Romain Chanu, who's going to help me a lot during production for making new characters and stuff like that. So yeah, as I was saying, for challenges, so we have a lot of characters. We have approximately 120 characters, so That was a lot to approach. And in those, we have 10 main characters, 25 skin. We have approximately 60 enemies and 20 NPC. And all of them have different size, different shapes, different materials. Like we have some that are made of wood, other fabric, skin, everything. So that was a big challenge, and we have one solution to solve that.
Like, as we've said, we were a small team, so we had to think about everything with the idea of reusability in order to be able to reuse, in the environment case, the assets in a lot of environment, and that's the same for the textures. And as you can see, the obvious solution for this is creating smart materials. We didn't create those at an early stage of the production as we were not sure of how we would need. It was created during the production as we were doing the props. And for example, the black and gold metal was made on the base of an asset for the manor, and so that we can have the smart material to be reused on every asset of the same level. So it was really a huge time saver for the production to be able to reuse all of these smart materials. As you can see on these examples, we have a lot of black and gold in the project. You can see them in pretty much every level of the game, and these were all pretty fast to texture because we had those smart materials. So you could just have to tweak the materials to get the idea of you need. And it was not only on the environment side.
Yeah, as Mathieu said, those same material was used in the character art department, and yeah, this is a great example. Those are some of the enemies and main characters. So we have the Clair Obscur, the Paintress, sorry for the spoiler, and Maël. And yeah, they use the same material as shown before, especially on the black and gold. And it was not only super handy to use the same one, it was also, like it helped speed up the process. And like also it grounded the character and environment together. Like you are making sure that the artistic direction is constantly the same everywhere. And so yeah, that was a big advantage for us to use smart material. And as I said before, there's a strong contrast on those characters. And that was a big part of the art direction. But not only that, you can see a lot of the curvature and ambient occlusion like super marked, especially on Maël's armor. And that's something really important in the art direction, and I'm going to let my friend talk about it.
So about contrast, we maintain the contrast on every asset using curvature and ambient occlusion additions. Like the curvature will help bring light to the edges, and the ambient occlusion will make the cavities more visible. So we had 3 ways to do this with Substance Painter. The first one is to use generators, in which you have a lot of parameters to have the result you need, and you can add noise or any filter you need on top of it. Then you can use directly the bake maps. This is more a straightforward method, but it is really handy with a level. You can have a really good result too. And then you can use the smart masks that are provided by Substance Painter. That gives a more final render really quickly because you already have some dirty effect or sand effect on those. And this is really handy to use because it's really fast. On my side, I like to have my own smart material that uses a base of smart, yeah, it's just generators. It's my favorite setup. And I always have this layer already set up with the curvature in addition, for example. And yeah, so I can change the setup inside of them to have the result I need. An example of that is with the Arc de Triomphe from Lumière. Actually, there it is only a scan that we broken. So it's kind of flat because the scan texture are kind of flat every time we use it. So I added, first of all, I added a dirt mask to add more life into it. And then we can start with the ambient occlusion part. So the base is pretty simple. It's just a smart mask to get all the ambient occlusion aspects. Then I add a warp node to break the edges and add more life to the big shapes. And then I add an overlay, another layer to just break the big areas, the big flat areas, and to have a more dirty look to the ambient occlusion. So you can see the result here. So you can much more see the cavities on the assets. And then I add my curvature mask, which is pretty much the same base, just a smart mask, with on top of it a warp to break the edges and to avoid having like straight lines that are not living and not existing in the real life. And I add another layer on top of it with a lot more information, but with less intensity, so I can have more information on the big edges of the curvature. So you can see the result here. So I found the final result much more readable than the first one. As you can see, it's really more realistic and more interesting to look. But the idea of contrast is always in all the texture we make. Like for example here with the metalness and the roughness, you can see that these are really contrasted. And so it gives more life to all the reflection of the game. And we found that like every asset would be more interesting with a lot of reflections. And we will see a bit more about all those techniques in the live demo from my friend Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Mathieu, for introducing me. And before we jump in Substance Painter, I wanted to show you a bit of my low poly and also my approach on making character. Just to give you an idea, I'm doing all my high poly in ZBrush. Then I will do my low poly UV and a bit of topology in Blender. Then I will do all my texturing in Substance Painter. And sometimes I would use Marvelous Designer to like make some clothes, but most of them are made by hand. And so the most important advice I can give you is think about the next step. Like for example, when you are like doing your high poly in ZBrush, think about how you can make your life easier for the retopology step. And when you are doing your retopology, think about how it will affect UVs. And when you are doing UV, obviously think about how it will affect texturing and how it will like make your life easier. And that's the best advice I can give you. It will feel like the process is much more fluid, you know. Like so that's the most important advice I can give you. Think about the next step. And so this is my low poly of one of the outfit of the game. So this is the male obscure outfit. And why I wanted to show it to you is because I wanted to show you how I approach UVs. I won't do a UV here, but yeah, but I can show it to you. And so those red lines are seams. And as you can see, I wanted to have like seams that are placed just like in real life. This will give you a lot of realism. Especially like up the sleeve here or on this part, because in the high poly it's another piece of fabric. And think also about how selecting some of those parts would be easier. Like here we just select all the UVs with just one click, and here also. And then when you are when you have done all of your edges, always like make your UV straight. Those are not perfectly straight. Like choose your bottle, you know, like if it's not perfectly straight, it's okay. So, and it works perfectly fine, but you need them to have them in a special position, because when you will add noises, especially like noise fabric, you need to have them go in a certain direction. I will show it to you more in the Substance, but like here for the arm, it needs to be straight like that, also for the top or the bottom parts. But yeah, so this is really important, and it will have a key role to play on the next step, especially for texturing. So this is really important, and it will make your life much more easier. And now I'm going to show it to you in Substance Painter. So this is the texture version of the male obscure skin, as I've said. And we're going to do together the armor. And as you can see, this is just the baked part, and it looks kind of flat. It's not really interesting. We lose a lot of detail that I had in my sculpt. And when I'm doing a character, not only in character, it's also the same process in environment. Before we jump into like adding, for example, here the marble or gold, we always do one thing, and we drag and drop a smart material that's called base for us. And it's made up of 6 layers. So it's this one. Like actually, when you have a baked model, it's like that. So you have a bit of a rough here and there, and it's too white, you can't see anything. So it's made up of 6 layers, and this is them. And so we have the base layer, and it's just a gray color with a roughness to 1, white to 1, because I don't want to have any reflection. I want to see perfectly everything. So I always do like a roughness to 1. Then I will add a ambient occlusion fill layer with just a bake map with a level, and I will just multiply it, and then instantly my model will have much more volume, you know. So this is really important. Then I will add a curvature map, like the bake map, and also a level just to tweak it if I wanted to. Like here I've just tweaked some values. I will duplicate it then, invert it, and now I will have a cavity map. And like that also, I will have much more detail. Then I will do sometime another one just for roughness, but here I wanted to have that, so I just do it. And yeah, so you have instantly you have much more detail. And to crank it even more, I always add like this one. So this is a light generator, and I put it in from top to have like kind of a gradient thing. Why I don't use the gradient is because I think personally that a gradient looks kind of flat, and with a light generator, I have much more detail, so it's much more interesting. So yeah, I just put it in an overlay with a white color. And then also I duplicate it, invert it, and call it shadows, you know. And now, just with the color, you have much more detail than before. And instantly your model looks much more interesting, and you can see more of the detail that I had in the sculpt and everywhere. And also a great way to do that, like one of the great advantages to do that is that you can see all of the baking error. And as I said, choose your battle. And this one is on nobody will notice that, like even those ones. So like choose your battle, nobody would say that, so just skip it, you know. But yeah, so this is really important, and instantly your model looks way better. Like if I had some of them, like it's super flat, and just add them, and it's way better. So yeah, we always do that, not only in character, but in environment. And this, as I said, curvature and ambient occlusion are a big part of our art direction. So yeah, and once I've done that, I can just do the rest of the texturing. And so for this character, I already know what type of material I would need, and a lot of them were already crafted before, like especially the black and gold, but also like the obsidian and everything. So I would just have to search on my library the obsidian material, drag and drop it, and there, like with just one click, I have like an obsidian part. So what it is essentially made of is a lot of layers. Not all of them are renamed. Choose your battle. And yeah, so I just renamed the important ones so that if I give it to Mathieu, he would instantly know which one are important and which one you will have to change. For example, like the marble vein. If I wanted to have like change the scale of the vein, for example, if the model were much more bigger, I could just with one click change the scale here, but here it's okay, so I don't have to change it. And the rest is just smart masks, smart like bake map, and also generator. So it should work if your bake is correct, but right now it works. So yeah, you just have to drag and drop, and it's okay. And underneath, I would have a dark gold, so that I would have this rusty effects. That's why I added like this mask on the obsidian, and I have like it's one of the masks available by Substance. I just tweak some values, but it gives this like a nice crisp mask out, especially on the cavities, and I really liked it because it would give like this nice rusty gold effect on the character. So yeah, we just like that, it's way better. And then I will add another one called noises. It's not like super visible, but it gives some nice effect, especially on some cinematics and things like that. Like you have more roughness and interesting things that are going on. And then I will add one of the most important material in the whole game. So it's the gold of expedition. You don't have a lot of thing in it, like just a couple of layers. And so that in that way, it's really easy to tweak. But normally, you don't have to do anything. You just drag and drop it, and then you will add a mask of your choices. So here, I have like this nice curvature effect that we wanted. And it's made up of this smart mask. And I just tweak some value. And pro tips, I don't know if you know it. We learned that very late in the production, but you have like this a small window that you can open, and you can tweak much more like precise thing, like rather than with just a level. So for example, if I don't want the fine and sharp edges, I could just mask them out, and I could like just whoop, and then I would have my big curvature part or like those ones. So this is super handy. You can also tweak it here to, oh, where is it? Here. You can have like cavities or edges or something else. So that's super handy, and we used it a lot during production. And yeah, so now we have like this nice effect going on the armor, and it's done. So in a real production timeline, it would took me something like 1 hour just to tweak some level and things like that. So this is really really fast, really handy. Obviously, on this one, I didn't have to make new materials because like this guy has all the material that were already available. But yeah, so this was super fast, and that's how we approach texturing. But I can also like for the rest of the character, it's the same process. Like I can show you here on the top, and you can already see like for the noises, especially on the fabric, that it go up the sleeve and down here. And this is because we made our UV correct. So this is why it's important, you know, like, and also it cuts at the right place. And yeah, so this is a really, really important part of making character, like especially here for the pattern and everything. And one of the big aspects of the production is reusing assets, as I said. And to give you an idea, like the gray shirt here, it's the same material that was used on Gustave in the intro of Lumière. He has a blue suit, and it's the same material. I just put it in gray, and it worked. And even here, like the leather here is the same one. Oh, I did it just up. It's the same. Well, okay, it's okay. And it's the same here than here, and it's actually the leather of Renoir's boot. I just stole it and put it here, and nobody noticed. And like even the button, it's the same here and here. The rope material is the same everywhere on all the characters. I would add some different tweak in it, but yeah. So this is super handy, super fast to use, and like just before, like all of the important material are renamed, like on the layer. And like for example, when you are doing your UVs, I said like think about how it will be easier for you to pick stuff, like to select them. And if I wanted to have like those parts gray, like more darker, I would just use my UV selection and boom, 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 and then it's dark and it's super easy to use. And I don't have to like paint stuff, and that's something that we don't really want to do in Sandfall, like paint by hand, because it took a lot of time, and we didn't have a lot of time, so we just have to like be smart about it, like use as much generator as you can, as much smart map as you can, and like if you have to select stuff, it's better if it's just by UVs and not just painting them by hand, and yeah, and also like we reused material, but also like asset. Like this logo is the same as on Lune's book, you know, on her waist. It's the same logo. I just stole it and put it there. And yeah, so this is how we approach making a character. But it's the same process for enemy, and I'm going to show it to you with this guy. So this guy is called Machine à Pied, and he's made up of a lot of parts from different enemies and NPC. Like obviously he's made up of gestural parts, but also like this arm is the same as one of the Sakapatat enemy. I just stole the arm and tweaked it a bit, and yeah, it works. And I did that for everything. Like even the lollipop is the same as the Barbasucette enemies. So in that way, like modeling could take a lot less time, but also everything else after that. So yeah, and like for texturing this guy, I would just have to drag and drop the gestural smart material, and then I would just have to select area that I wanted. Like for example, the wood, I would just have to select them by hand with just the UV or object selection tool, and same for the gears, same for the metal parts, and with just a couple of layers and clicks, you already have a gestural. We didn't have anything painted by hand, and it will take much more or less time, and it will look good enough. So yeah, it's perfect. And like I would just do that, then I would have a base, and then we wanted to have this enemy in a place called Versos Draft. And in this place, the goal was to have something like imagined by a child. So we have to, we wanted to have a 2D looks and something that is rough, with a big paintbrush and everything. So to emphasize the 2D looks, we wanted to increase even more some of the contrast. So I would just do that. And then I will drag and drop the Versus Draft smart material. And in this case, with just one click, you already have something that is good enough to go in the Versus Draft. And unfortunately, Versus Draft, in the art direction, we changed some stuff a bit, and we wanted some big brush stroke. And obviously, you had to do them by hand, but we wanted to be smart about it. So we would add a generator or smart material, and then on top of it, a paint layer that is multiply. So you just have something like that, and then you would just mask out the area with paint stroke. So it would take much more or less time than just doing it by hand on every layer. So that was a great way to ease the process for us. And with just a couple of layers, they are not even renamed. You can just see the colors there. So and it's perfect. And we also have some of them that are just with the light. Like here, you can see the blue light coming from the top and everywhere. And yeah, and then I would add those one that are made by hand just to give the drawing. Then I would even add even more light and shadows and again, increase some of the contrast, sharpen. And then we faced a problem, because we wanted to have 2D looks on the character, but our art direction is much more realistic. So we were kind of stuck with something like that is funny and everything, but it's not really 2D look. So we didn't know how to do it, and we were wondering okay, if we do it by hand, it would take us a lot of time, and we were kind of stuck. And then Substance 3D released an update, and it basically saved our ass because we didn't know how to do it. And they dropped this little guy called stylization. And this is the secret ingredient to Versus Draft, because with just one click, you stylize your character. And that's what we wanted to have. And especially you can here, we even duplicated it to have a stylized normal map. It even increased some of the normal maps. So in the game, the shadow would be much more contrasted and everything. So that's super handy for us. Especially here, you can see the brush strokes that are in 2D, and it was much more easier, and it saved everything for Versus Draft. So yeah, so that's one of the important philosophy of Sandfall, is to always be curious about the update of your software. For us, we're always super curious about Unreal Engine, but also Substance Painter or ZBrush, because since we don't have a lot of manpower, we need to be smart about the tools that are given to us. So yeah, and that's about it for the presentation. For the demo.
To show you how we use those filters inside environments, you have an example on the left of a pirate toy that is used on a gestural quest in the DLC. So it is really just a basic texturing with some stylization filter on top of it. And on the right, you have the paintings from the manual that all use the matte FX all painting filter that really made all those paintings really handy to create, because you just have to take a screenshot in the game and add this filter over it to have this paint look and smudgy look. So it was really instantly. So every paintings in the manor was made like that. Another example here with this slide, you can see that it gets from really noisy without the stylization filter to something really more painty and smudgy. Again, with the balloon, which is really noisy, and with the combination of the two, you have a more abstract and painter look. And then you have the comeback of the Happiness Manager Monaco, which is a toy inside the DLC, and he uses the same kind of stylization on the texture. But how about the large assets? We'll talk just about the small assets, so with simple texturing process, but we have to get all these guys the same resolution, and so we used a mask workflow to do it. So all the architecture that you can see on the screenshot are with this workflow. So how does it work? It works with a simple base with a tile texture that you can change in the engine to have the nice resolution you need. And it is combined with a mesh normal created on ZBrush and baked in Substance Painter. So as you can see, the mesh is kind of flat like this. So we added, for every asset that uses the mask setup, we use a mask for curvature and one for ambient occlusion, as always in the game. And you can see here that the mesh is much more readable and the texture pops out really more. And then we had the opportunity to add up to 4 more layers to get more details and different effects on every layers. All these layers were made in Substance Painter with those kind of render like RGB look to see how they interact with each other. So the first 2 are just uniform color added on top of the base to have those paint effects on the head and to respect how the character looks. And then I added a gold on some parts. On this mask, it's only another texture. So you have 2 maps more for the gold, 2 tiling texture. And then I added a little flowing paint effect that you can see on every paint shapes in the DLC. So you can see that you have a final result with just masks created on Substance Painter. Another example with the Expeditioner boat created by Carla Devez, you can see that here is pretty flat with just the base texture, and she added some curvature and ambient occlusion gold to have more information on it and to make it more readable. And then we added 2 more layers with original texture inside it. The first one is for water effects on the bottom of the hull, as you can see. And then we added some rust, to have, again, more information and to make it like it's crossed the sea and it is a real boat. This workflow was really helpful in order to reuse all these assets throughout the game because, again, as we were a small team, we had to be smart and reuse the assets throughout all the environments. So here you can see that the columns are from Siren and was reused inside Crimson Forest with just a different tile texture at the base, and every different parameters can be tweaked to have a different look. And here another example with the Flying Manor, which is more black and gold look and share the same architecture as the Siren level. So yeah, this workflow helped us a lot for gaining efficiency. Also, we sometimes retextured pack or marketplace assets when we needed because we could not create all these assets with just a small team we were. So sometimes we will get what we needed online if it fits the artistic direction, but on the texturing side, it doesn't belong to the game now. So we retextured all of them with Substance Painter with the smart material we created. So it was really handy to use. But how do we pack all those textures? We used the output preset system of Substance Painter to create the one we needed. We have just a few of them for the environment side. The first one is for the basic assets with just a technical stuff with just 2 maps used because we use just the 2 first layers of the normal, and the third one is recreated inside the shader. So it's really more optimized to do like this. So we do this. And we also have a workflow for the basic mask workflow. It's an output with just 1 map for normal and curvature and element occlusion masks. And as I've said, you can add up to 4 more masks. And it's in just a map with RGBA informations. And how do we manage the tile textures? Because we have a lot of them in the landscapes and in the large assets, as I've said. We had 3 ways to approach that problem, and from the fastest to the more time-consuming. The fastest is obviously to find something already existing on marketplaces like Substance 3D assets. Maybe you have to make some tweaks to make it fit the artistic direction, but it's really, really fast. The other possibility that we had and that we used was creating those tile texture from a asset that we textured before. For example, on the right you have the paint shapes. To create the tile texture, we selected one part that we wanted in the UVs and make it tile with the filter from Rob Tomlinson called Make It Tile in Substance Painter, but you can also do it in Substance Designer. And the last option is obviously to use Substance Designer, but as we are not masters of the software in the studio and that we don't have a material artist full-time, we avoided doing it for every texture. But in this case, you have 2 different textures from Siren that were created inside the Substance Painter software. And the 2 on the left are from Lumiere, because we couldn't find something that really recreates the Haussmann buildings from Paris online. But we also used a lot Substance Designer to create specific effects inside the engine. The first one I want to show you is one from Versus Draft. It helps create those paint strokes and shapes on pretty much every asset of the level. It's a pretty basic setup inside Designer. It's a vertical noise with some warp to distort it, and then I add 3 of them in another graph to just be able to change the seed and everything to have 3 different variations of the same noise, to be able to put 3 different colors on it. And so you can see the result here. It's before, it's much more gray than in the actual final look, where it's more living and have a lot of colorful areas in the meshes. Another example that I created using Substance Painter and Designer combined is this effect on a banner in which you can just change the damage area of the texture inside the engine, so you don't have to export like 6 maps to do different variation. You just have to change a parameter inside the engine. And another thing that we did is this mask created by Alexandre Breton in order to create an effect on every buildings of Lumiere. It adds some dirt and some roughness areas projected by world aligned position. So every building has his own dirt leaks and stuff like that. So yeah, as you can see, with just simple techniques and well-thought workflow, we were able to create the game we wanted without compromising the quality and respecting the scope we wanted. So yeah, let's go for the Q&A session. Thank you. C'est bien. Ouais, c'est bien. Bizarrement, je pense que c'est la meilleure qu'on a faite. Ouais, comme c'est chiant. Je vois rien. Je vois rien du tout. We can't see anything.
Hello?
Yes, so it's a wonderful talk. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You mentioned you didn't have a materials artist. Do you think you would hire a materials artist if you had to do it all over again?
I think we would not want a material artist full-time because we don't need that much materials, but I'm really interested in Substance Designer, so I want to deep dive into it and to improve myself to do more materials like this.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi. Hello?
Where is it?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
you.
Actually, I was going to ask something about material art as well. You guys mentioned that you didn't use any material IDs for painting when you're bringing the characters nor the environment into... You just use the UVs to select the data sets, right?
Yeah, for the most part, we did that with just selection of UVs. Yeah, there are kind of some of exception, but most of them are done like this, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep. I just wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Hello. I noticed on some of your metal maps there was like a lot of gray. I was wondering if there's a specific stylization reason for it.
No, we just find it more interesting with those kind of values that are much more like grungy, and there's just a look like that we like.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also we, like, some people would say that you only have to have wide and dark value for metal, but in real life it's not like that. Like you kind of have, and if the end looks is good, then whatever, you know, like.
Hi. I noticed on your low poly that you had some tris and some normal quads. I was wondering if that was to reinforce the edges, like the folds of your clothing, or was that for another reason?
Yeah, it's it's exactly like that. It's like with just simple edges on the right place, you emphasize more the shape of the character, and that's really important. Like with just a couple of edges placed in on fold or stuff like that, your model will look instantly like higher quality, and that's really important. And it will not affect like rigging and for example, I'm gonna say that one of the worst things I've done on the game, like to gain time, I even have some of the enemy that are just decimated model. Like, so triangle are not a huge problem, you know, but the end result is the most important part. And if you gain time, then you gain time, you know, like.
Of course. Thank you so much.
My question actually builds off of that. I noticed that as you were doing your models, it really felt like a lot of the process was spent going Substance to ZBrush, ZBrush to Substance, sometimes making things just so you can bake textures in ZBrush into Substance. And it made me really wonder, how long did y'all really spend retypologizing your models in Blender? And how much was, okay, we're in ZBrush now, quick UV pass in Blender, let's go to Substance? Yeah,
it's like what I would usually do is make my model in ZBrush, but I like to work with subdivide model. And so I would do a quick pass on the row topology. And this would be a base for the actual end result topology. And I would just like do a good enough retopology, subdivide it a couple of times in ZBrush, then send it back to Blender, add like those triangles that she mentioned before, and then just bake it in Substance Painter. Also, I like to rename like. I would just let the character in a position. Like some people like to move object to not have artifacts. I don't care, but yeah, just put them like in the end result, and I would just rename every single asset. You know, like the shirt, the pants, or the rope. I would just rename them. Add a suffix, like for example underscore high, and for my low poly I would add underscore low. And in Substance, you can bake by name, and it will like only select those parts, and you don't have artifacts. So that way, it's much more easy. And if I do some tweaks in ZBrush, like for example, when I bake my model, I'm thinking, oh, this isn't perfect, then I would just do it in ZBrush, and I would just move my low poly to match it as good as I can, and then bake it again. You know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi. When I was doing the line, I noticed a few students and I wanted to ask, what resource would you say was fundamental as your journey is as being an artist? So I'm basically asking for homework, right?
Well,
I stumped you.
for me, like, do the project that pleases you. Like, if you want to pursue like character art, like, make sure that that's something that you like, and just like do stuff that you like. It's the best way for you to progress. And but yeah, I would recommend like doing some anatomy sculpting. I like to do, like one thing I've done a lot when I was a student that was I found it really cool is like I would do a character in pose with no mirror, like no symmetry. I would just do it like from Dynamesh, and I would actually pose the model like at the right beginning, and I would just sculpt everything like a real sculptor will do it. This was a really great exercise for me, and yeah.
All right.
And on the environment side, I would say pretty much the same thing. Work on environment and art direction that you like. And to improve yourself, you can find a lot of resources on YouTube. On my side, I'm learning designer with YouTube. And also, you can find some really cool Substance Designer files in Adobe 3D Assets library that you can download free. And then you can just go into that and see how they do stuff. And also you can add to go to like 80 level or stuff like that to see how environment artists break their process, and so you can understand how they do things. Like the mask workflow we made in the project was made from a blog I've seen in 80 level, and I just recreated those kind of effects on my side, but yeah.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Hi. You mentioned that you reused a lot of like the 3D models for different levels and different like coloring situations. Did you do like separate PNG images for each of those color systems, or like the different instances of color, or did you do any color shifting in engine, like with the materials?
I'm not sure I've understood the question, but the way we change the color is just with a hue parameter and a multiply and a multiply color that we can add on the basic one just to change the texture of the mesh. And also we have one for lightness, saturation, and contrast, and that's it.
Did you do that in Painter or in the engine?
In the engine.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the art director that makes a lot of the set dressing could make on his own feeling, his own mood with the assets and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, our art director has a lot of influence on the mood of every level and everything.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. My question is, do you have any tips for like trim sheets, or if someone's like never used Substance Designer because of the node system, which many have told me it's scary if you don't understand it. Any tips how to practice those, how to get enough practice so you don't get scared or use it easily?
Like for trim sheets, I usually do them with a combination of Blender to have all pretty set up, like for bricks or stuff like that, and then I go to sculpt them into ZBrush. But to improve yourself in Substance Designer, what I found useful is to, I think Johnny Nodes make this, but it's really interesting channel to improve your designer workflows. He talks about common errors that you do, and also there are channels that explain one node by one node just how it works, and learning how basically a node works with really ease your workflow and helps you understand how it works and how you can use it in a real situation. So yeah, I think it would be this.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one last question, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I was curious about how your textures actually look in Engine when setting them up for like material instances and stuff. I know you had talked a lot about like mask workflow, but I was wondering if you guys had any issues with like texture compression issues and being able to actually render all of your textures, and what that looked like in Engine so that you could optimize the quality for the highest amount without having to deal with any of the compression issues.
I think every texture we use in environment are on BC7 compression setting. it's something that our technical artists said us, like, do this and it will be perfect. So I was like, yeah, perfect. And just we toggle the sRGB on the normal map just to don't have artifacts. And that's all we do on compression regarding the environments. And also we have everything in 2K for the resolution. And every screen that you've seen in the presentation was in engine, so that's how it looks. And it's all made with material instance, as you said. Like we have one master for the mask workflow, one for the basic environment assets, and we have a lot of settings inside it and a lot of material function to tweak and have specific effect. Like if you want to have something particular in an environment, we will create a material function that we add at the end of the process and the master, and so we can have more variety to it.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks. And I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.